you're welcome to step up in. There's a little breeze and some shade, so feel free to enjoy it if you'd like.
Can we sit down here? Like on the steps?
You can sit off to the sides.
So much ants on the thing.
There are
So much ants.
Sit on this
over here. This is not original. The only thing that's original is the slab and the whole room. Because we are so close to two creeks, this gazebo has actually been leveled up.
Oh, yeah, I see.
Poor gazebo. Yeah.
I don't want to mess with them.
Yeah, this is the last level of it. That's crazy though that this is from the home. Yeah. Alright, you guys, so this is original to the time of the Holbrooks being here, but as I was explaining, the gazebo structure has had to be rebuilt several times. We're really close to two different creeks, and we've had lots of flooding over the years, and so we have seen about 3 kind of rebuilds of the structure itself over time, but the foundation is still original from the Holbrooks. Now, when the Holbrooks were here, the sisters, they had a kind of a habit of entertaining up on the hill where all the tables and chairs are right now. That was what they did. That's where they threw all their parties, and they would bring out linens and china and all the works for these kinds of parties. However, once they gave the house over to Jolene, Jolene had a little bit of a different idea. She loved this space. She loved the gazebo, and she decided to have a rose garden planted all along the sides of the gazebo. And so she brought all the entertainments down here, and she threw her parties down here. She had her tables, her linens, her crystal. This is where she would throw a lot of her events, breaking the tradition of both her mother and her mom. Now, over the years, this has been used for, let me let that pass real quick. So over the years, the gazebo has been used for a lot of different weddings over this course of the time that it's been here. In fact, it even has a little bell here that still works to this day. But in the 90s, there was a very interesting wedding that happened here. There was a wedding that had 150 guests. And these 150 guests had about 75 here, 75 on this side, and they were in the middle of a wedding ceremony when they kind of witnessed something very strange. And so at that time, they had the minister kind of in the middle, bride and groom right up here, and Joanne, the owner of the property, she was up the hill kind of working on their banquet, getting the tables ready, all that kind of good stuff. And Joanne noticed that at one point, the wedding ceremony pretty much came to a complete stop. The bride, the groom, the minister, they were just kind of standing very still and almost as if they were staring directly at something. And so Joe thought, oh crap, there's probably a skunk, and it's going to spray this bride on her wedding day. That's where her event planner mind went, and so she was a little freaked out. And so she was hoping that it would pass and everything would work out. And eventually she saw that the wedding continued just as normal. And so after it was over, she decided to ask the bride and groom, hey, what happened? Why did you stop in the middle of the ceremony? And the bride and groom, they looked at her kind of bewildered, and they told her, I think we all saw this. What we experienced is that we saw a man, a Native American man with a horse. And on top of that horse was a Native American woman. And they appeared right over here at the parking lot. And they passed by all the guests, went in front of the gazebo, and then right here where these trees are, that tree line is, they just completely disappeared. Now all 150 people swore that they saw this phenomenon take place at the same time and saw these 3 figures completely disappear in front of them. Now, if we look at the history of Native Americans and we look at kind of how they held ceremony for weddings, we do find some similarities. Native Americans, they didn't have these ceremonies where they go to courthouse or to perhaps a church or something like that. What they would often do is the man, he would meet family and friends with the bride and a horse. And how it would take place is often the woman would be with him. The woman would be put on that horseback, and they would have family members waiting either at the river or at the creek for them, and they would be ready to kind of unite these two people together. And perhaps what they saw was a repeat of love. Perhaps a couple getting that unification done with their families and their friends right over here at the Salado Creek. Just an echo of time, maybe even giving that married couple a little bit of a blessing on their special day. Either way, we have never had that experience repeat. We have never had anybody claim that again. But I think it's very interesting that 150 people all kind of experience the same phenomenon at the same time on kind of a special day in somebody's life. Now, one of the other associations with this is, of course, Jolene. I mentioned to you guys that Jolene really liked to have her celebrations around this gazebo with a center point. And so Joanne has actually gotten the current owner many phone calls in the middle of the night, people driving down Holbrook saying, hey, I think you may have like a trespasser in your gazebo. There's a woman in a white dress kind of just hanging out. And Joanne usually just responds, I think I know who that is. I think it's her. And very honestly, she often believes that it is just the spirit of Jolene watching the space that she loves and that she still feels very connected to. Questions? No? All right, one thing that I know that I always get questions about is this hole right over here. If you see that crater, so I'm going to point it out before anybody asks. I told you guys that this used to be the Bluebonnet Creamery. Remember that? So when it was a creamery, this was actually just a watering hole for some of the cattle to be able to drink water. And so that's why it's still existed. We're going to go.
What is that right there? I'm sorry.
Oh, we're going to go to that next.
Awesome.
It is a life-size like playhouse. Let's check it out.
Used to be a big playhouse.
I thought that was the dairy barn. Because there's only another door for the dairy barn. Most of the time we do the night ones where we go like to prove like what happened.
I don't think it's safe to go inside.
Why?
Because it looks like it wants to fall over.
If anyone wants to get closer for a photo, you're welcome to. I'm just trying to stay in the shade. Feel free to get close for a photo if you like.
Halloween.
All right, you guys. So the structure behind me is a life-size playhouse. It's from the 1950s. This belonged to Jolene and Park Street's daughter named Jingles. Jingles was a difficult kid as far as we know. A lot of people have described her as somebody that was very bossy and did not make friends. Her parents supposedly were very worried about this and worried about her not having a lot of friends. And so they decided that they were going to purchase her this like life-size playhouse in hopes that it would attract little girls from the neighborhood to want to come play with her dad. And that's what they did. And it did. It worked. Actually, Jingles made a lot of friends over the years. And in fact, Stephen and I have been doing these tours, and we've had elderly people come up with their grandkids wanting to show them this little playhouse because they used to play here as kids. So it's really kind of a special thing for people. I think there was a lot of memories that were made here. But unfortunately, in 1998, if you guys are from San Antonio, you might remember we had a lot of flooding issues in that year. Yeah, it was a terrible year. This property was really heavy hit by flooding. In fact, that gazebo was leveled during that time, and water went in just barely about a half an inch into the house. So imagine opening those two kind of doors out front and opening it to what looked like a lake. That was kind of what Joanne and the property experienced during 1998. The house that was a playhouse behind me was completely underwater. And so that's why it is in such a state of disrepair and dilapidation because of that flood. We haven't had any flood that has been that significant like that since 1998. We actually lost, there's a lot of properties that own horses on this street. And many of the horses and donkeys
Feels like someone's back there,
on
huh?
the street actually succumbed to those floodwaters. It was a really, really tragic time in the history here. However, when Stephen and I first came to the property to investigate it, I don't know, there was something about this little structure.
There's just
the
like
darkness
something
was
else,
really
or I
calming
see a
and
head
creepy,
peeking out
and
somewhere.
I wanted to investigate. So this is the first place that I really investigated on the property.
There it is, behind the
And
tree.
what I did, the first thing I did was just kind of take my little audio recorder